Hey y'all, welcome into my channel. I am Polemicist. Wish I had better news for you today, less scary news, but Trump just made us much closer to realizing World War III. So today, on January 3rd, 2026, Saturday, he captured the president of Venezuela, under the guise of airstrikes. Okay, there's a lot to be said here, all right? But my first reaction is this has just made the world much more unstable, okay? And I'll get to that, all right? I don't need to research the response by MAGA Republicans. I know that they're going to be behind Trump pretty much no matter what. So we can just expect that they'll support it, okay? They already have they cite justification that Maduro was charged on narco-terrorism and other charges in 2020 in U.S. federal court, and that he is a tyrant who the opposition in Venezuela has said he has been rigging elections. And we know this since the constitutional crisis. So that was a few years ago. I think the opposition leader was Juan Guaido that had to flee the country because of Maduro and his refusal to leave office. So there's plenty of justification for why this is a good thing. But I'm going to get into why, on the surface, this looks like it's a good thing for American strategic interests for democracy across the world. But it actually is far more threatening to global peace and American-led international order. So I first want to start with the reasoning that the administration is using for this illegal act of aggression. And then we're going to just do a full analysis of this, okay, based off of the responses by the main axis now that's forming, that's adversarial to America, that is China, Russia, Iran, and other BRICS nations. But we'll go into more analysis after that. So first, let's start here. This is on Reuters. Maduro was indicted in U.S. federal court in 2020 on narco-terrorism and other charges for running what prosecutors called a scheme to send tons of cocaine to the U.S. through an alleged cartel de los soles. He has always denied that. And then Attorney General Pam Bondi said on X, they will soon face the full wrath of American justice on American soil in American courts. So both Maduro and his wife were captured. Okay. Now, let's get to what some of these countries in the new Axis have been saying about this. So, again, this is reported by Reuters. China, its foreign ministry said, China firmly opposes such hegemonic behavior by the U.S., which seriously violates international law, violates Venezuela's sovereignty, and threatens peace and security in Latin America and the Caribbean. We urge the U.S. to abide by international law and the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and stop violating the sovereignty and security of other countries. It's pretty devastating what they said here, because they're underscoring that the current world order, the international world order, that was established after World War II by the United States is now being forsaken by the United States. So the international rule of law is being undermined by the chief architect of it. We'll get into why that's pretty terrible. But first, let's go on to other countries like Russia. Its foreign ministry said, Latin America must remain a zone of peace, as it declared itself to be in 2014, and Venezuela must be guaranteed the right to determine its own destiny without any destructive, let alone military interference from outside. We support the statement by the Venezuelan authorities and the leaders of Latin America countries calling for an immediate meeting of the UN Security Council. Again, repeating the same tenets of the international law that's being violated, which that the main tenets are a nation is entitled to its sovereignty and territorial integrity, which means you can't be invaded. It's the very same law that we've been appealing to and citing with Ukraine, with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Pretty much in any instance where a nation is invaded, we cite the international law. So if the international law is being violated by the chief architect of the international law, really undermines the credibility and definitely encourages other countries to maybe consider an alternate form, one that might be being suggested by this new adversarial axis of powers that is China, Russia, and Iran. And they call it the multipolar world order. So let's finish with Iran's statement too. Wait, did I highlight it? Yeah. They also condemn this as a violation of the nation's sovereignty, of Venezuelan sovereignty, again citing the violation of the international law and the hypocrisy of America for doing so. But it goes a little extreme here to just show you the fervor that is in Iran. What matters is that when a person realizes, this is from Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, what matters is that when a person realizes the enemy is arrogantly trying to impose something on the country, on the officials, on the government, and on the nation, one must stand firmly against the enemy and bare one's chest in resistance. We will not yield to the enemy. Relying on Almighty God, trusting in God, and with confidence in the support of the people, God willing, and by divine grace, we will bring the enemy to its knees. So, they're all stating, the big three, Iran, China, and Russia, are all supremely against it. And Russia's trying to convene the UN Security Council. This all undermines the international rule of law. So these new Axis powers of Iran, China, and Russia, they're correctly pointing out the hypocrisy of America violating its own international rule of law and the UN Charter thereof, which was established by America. By doing this, it hands these powers legitimacy for their multipolar world order that they're trying to replace the international law that America has established. One in which spheres of influence are the predominant ruling order. So, Russia gets its sphere of influence, China gets its sphere of influence, America gets its sphere of influence. And even Trump went so far as to actually use the Monroe Doctrine, which is like from the 1800s, to say that since the Monroe Doctrine says that the U.S. can lay claim to influence in its sphere of influence, its region. It's Trump is citing a policy perspective that very closely aligns with the multipolar world order. So whatever strategic gains are gained here regionally, globally, we're taking a pretty serious hit to the international law in the U.S.-led world. So like I said, you can expect the Republicans and MAGA to be in full support of this because it removed a tyrant and who was a tyrant that was charged for narco-terrorism. But it's so short-sighted. It's not even funny, because by citing a spheres of influence as your argument and justification to invade another country, which violates the international law that your country established for the world, it not only points out the immense hypocrisy of that current world order that the U.S. is leading, it incentivizes other nations to follow a different world order, if suggested by, say, China or Russia, at promoting world peace. And that ultimately is how I'm interpreting this. It's a much unsafer world that we're living in now. I mean, it's kind of just nuts to say, or just to wake up this morning and see that the United States just captured the leader of Venezuela, which is also an oil-rich country. But Venezuela's allies are Russia and Iran. Venezuela is mainly armed. Its military equipment is mainly armed through Russia. Putin has largely supported Maduro. And it seems suspicious because through the guise, like once again, through the guise of advancing American strategic interests across the world, Trump instead appears to be advancing at a much larger degree the interests of the adversaries of America, who are seeking a multipolar world, one that's post-American hegemony. Aristotle says in his book on politics, which I highly recommend everyone read, it's one of the first political philosophy books, or if not the first, ever written. But in it, in book 5, he points to how constitutions are undone by movements sometimes outside of the country, by other nations that have the opposite forms of constitution. So in this case, Russia is only a democracy in name only. It's had a president, a leader that's amended the constitution to stay in power for 20 plus years. China, so there is also basically a dictatorship. There's no really input from the people to change their leader. And then you have America, who changes its leaders every 4 years. So China and Russia want America to, its constitution that's built around democracy, to unravel, like Aristotle says. In Aristotle's Politics, Book 5, if you want to look this up, there's something called Brecker's numbers. You can use Perseus.org and go to Book 5, section 1307b, where Aristotle says, "And constitutions of all forms are broken up sometimes from movements initiating from within themselves, but sometimes from outside, when there is an opposite form of constitution either nearby or a long way off, yet possessed of power. This used to happen in the days of the Athenians and the Spartans. The Athenians used to put down oligarchies everywhere, and the Spartans democracies." So in this case, America would be Athens, Sparta would be Russia and China, because they're trying to put down democracies, advance their own regimes. Trump usually has support within his base to do the things that seem to be advancing American interests. But outside of his base, people think, like me, people on the left, think that he uses deception and cunning and guile to secretly advance the interests of the adversaries of America. And it's always been a mystery why it is, and it's not a mystery to me. You read Aristotle and his Politics, you see that tyrants are mainly interested in their own private interests. And chiefly, their private interest is to stay in power so that they can self-aggrandize and gain more in wealth. And you see Trump with all of his corruption and crypto, and his wealth has increased so much since taking office the second time. It's hard to refute these charges that he's this Aristotelian tyrant. This most recent case, this violates, like, deposing the leader of a sovereign nation, even though he's corrupt and a dictator, is against the international law, the peace, the order of peace that we've had since World War II. In doing so, when you erode that, it actually brings about the very same conditions that brought about World War II. So even though Trump campaigned as someone who is not going to bring about new wars, okay, but it's a scam. Like Nick Fuentes said, the far right political commentator that I disagree with on nearly everything. But he's right there. MAGA is a giant scam. It took him longer to get to that point. It took a lot of people longer. But some of us have been like, yeah, this guy's a con artist through and through. Only cares about self-aggrandizement. And you read Aristotle's Politics, you see how that aligns with a tyrant. But it's a scam. And in this most recent case, is no new wars. This is not going to amount in a war with Venezuela. I don't think so. But what it will bring about is far worse. It'll incentivize across the globe nations to start behaving like we are now. Invade countries. What's the justification? Well, it's in our sphere of influence. That's the exact same conditions and situation that was in the early 1900s, before World War II, that made America enter the war because of the rising number of regional conflicts based off of this world order that was just like might makes right. But man, I could get into it. He's more than just a con artist, Trump is. He's more than just a scammer. I mean, he's corrupted the people of the Christian faith. There is a ton of passages about what an antichrist is in the Bible. But basically, you can sum up that he's someone that pretends to be the good Messiah, the good teacher, but in actuality brings devastation and misery and people straying from their faith. And I think that's what Trump is. He's deceived the evangelicals to such a degree. He's corrupted them. And we're all paying for it. So we're in a brave new world now, everyone. Maduro, the president of Venezuela, is captured and en route to New York. Captured by United States forces under the command of President Trump. And China, Russia, Iran are calling on the UN to point out the hypocrisy of the American-led international rule of law. Undermining it and undermining the peace that it established after World War II. Well, thanks for watching. See ya. Be sure to like and subscribe if you like this, because we need the fight now more than ever. See ya.